Welcome to Jewish Physicist Responds. Today, B'ezras Hashem, we are going to speak about agnosticism. So we spoke last time, in the last episode, about naturalism and how based on the fine-tuning of the universe, empiricism is a strike against naturalism. We spoke about how Occam's razor, if it would be valid in such a regime, is also a strike against naturalism. And finally, we spoke about how the patterns of the universe are in themselves a multifaceted strike against naturalism. And I wanted to share the name of an article that I've mentioned in the past two episodes. I've now pasted it in episode 1. I'll try to, Yitz Hashem, whenever I forget something as I'm writing a video to post something in the comments. So this is Compliance, Identification, and Internalization, 3 Processes of Attitude Change by Herbert Kellman. It forms the basis of a lot of work in sociology, and I think it's helpful reading for this concept. I'll also introduce a particular bias that also points a person to go away from naturalism, meaning a person, because of this bias, he's going to argue for naturalism. So a person should try to get rid of that bias and live as a Jew. So there's a concept that Rav Elchanan Wasserman spoke about, which is that a person has a natural inclination to not allow themselves to be restrained morally or to be restrained in any external way. Meaning a person wants the ability, the freedom to live as an animal. And it turns out this is a well-known phenomenon. Let me find the name of it here. So it's known today as psychological reactance. And a person doesn't want anything that imposes upon him this accountability, this self-control, in the pursuit of moral perfection. And there are many other biases. I know a person hears this, they're going to say, oh, what about all these other biases? So we're going to discuss that in Yitz Hashem in a future episode, an episode just on biases. This is a topic that I've written about in the past and look forward to discussing in the future. This is just, a little shtickle. So now we're going to talk about agnosticism. So a person feels that he should just, live according to his default, which is naturalism. We said that this is very, sociological. A person lives in a Western or Enlightenment society. But here's what a person might say. They might say, well, a person's default is to live as an animal, right? A person's default is just to live as a salivating animal, or a person's going to say, look, I have no ideology at all, right? They might say, I don't have any ideology, I'm just going to live. I'm going to live in a neutral way. And so what I want to first address is whether there is such a thing as ideological neutrality and living in a neutral way. So now take a person, and suppose this person has never thought about life, just kind of going about his business. So you look at how he behaves and how he acts and what his views are. So his ideology in general is going to be the ideology of the people around him. If he had certain experiences, so his ideology might be slightly different. And the way he acts is going to be the way that people around him act. So such a person is certainly not neutral. And now what about if you would take this person and from the time that he was a baby, don't arrest me. So you put the person in a cage, without any exposure to anyone else. Food just came in and he ate the food, and it's very culturally neutral food, right? So so take this person and see how he lives. Okay, see how he lives. So he has no influence from anything around him, and take the way he lives, and what we're going to do with that is to construct out of it an ideology, right? Based on his actions and the way he responds to things, you really could construct an ideology from that, and that ideology that is fundamentally the basis with which he's operating. And it could be that ideology. It could be I am a salivating animal. I want pleasure and I want to avoid pain. Maybe, I don't know. You put a person in a cage, you'll see. Please don't. So you see that every person really has some sort of ideology because You take this person, and now you say, well, look, so you said a person should pursue pleasure and a person should avoid pain. So which is more important? Right? Think about it. He might give you an answer, or his actions, what he does is going to reflect an answer. And then you'll say, well, what if one is short-term pain for long-term pleasure? Or short-term pleasure for long-term pain. There are all these different situations and all these different scenarios. And all the time in our lives we're making these decisions, whether consciously or unconsciously. And really at the basis of such decisions really is an ideology. The ideology of how does a person live, right? And in essence, that's really what ideology is, right? The thing that forms the basis of how we act, that is our ideology. There might be different complexities and depths, but the ideology I'm speaking about is fundamentally required for a person to do anything. A person, if he's totally still, he just doesn't move, right? So maybe then you could say that a person doesn't have an ideology. Except then his ideology, it would seem, would be that it's best just to stand still and not to do anything because work is hard, and I want to avoid such a thing, the person would say maybe, right? So we see there really is no concept as absurd as the situations you might explore of a person who's really ideologically neutral. And so then, we get into a pragmatic sort of thing or an intellectual thing, right? A person can say, well, what's the most compelling? And so then, now at least we're talking, right? A person realizes that he has to do something, right? A person has to live in such a way. If a person lives, not as a Jew, so how's he living? He's not living in a neutral way. He's living in an enlightened Western way, right? He's living as, whatever the atheists think, whatever the people in the West think, like his thoughts are going to parallel theirs. His actions are going to parallel theirs. That's not neutral at all. It's just copying the majority society. And so I think with that said, I want to use this moment to speak about CP violation. For those who are not familiar, we look into the universe and we have quarks and antiquarks, electrons and positrons, neutrons and neutrinos and antineutrinos, and such things exist, except really all we see is the matter. All we see is the quarks, all we see is the electrons, all we see is the neutrinos, not the antineutrinos. And yet the standard model of physics comes and tells us that matter and antimatter should have been equal. And what happens when they're equal? So they collide and they recombine, and then there's nothing. They combine into non-existence. And it's the strange thing. We see this universe of matter and not antimatter. And so what do we find? It's that any interaction that seems like it should produce an equal amount of matter and antimatter, in the end it actually produces more matter than antimatter. It breaks the symmetry and allows matter to dominate. You could say that it's and what they call it is CP violation, and it's this mysterious process. We don't know exactly what causes it, but it's machriya between these two characteristics of the matter and antimatter, and it says, look, it should be equal, but I'm going to be machriya to the side of matter, and it creates that reality. And we've spoken as well about, Hashem says, I've set before you life and death, choose life. And we find ourselves in this interesting place where there's no neutrality. A person makes a decision, they do X or they do Y. Just as there's no agnosticism, meaning a person can ideologically identify as agnostic, but in terms of the way that he lives, it's either going to reflect an ideology of atheism or an ideology of Judaism or another ideology. And so there's an interesting thing. I was sitting in a lecture the other day, and Harav Nachum Lansky explained a fundamental concept from the Vilna Gaon. And I asked the source, and he said throughout all of the Gra, throughout all the Vilna Gaon, there's this concept, and it's a concept that he began by saying that a Jewish court has to have an odd number of judges, right? What you want an odd number of judges for is that you have an even balance of opinions, and then there's one judge to be machriya, right? Otherwise, we find the court halakhically has no existence at all, and the word he used was kiyum. Existence, this interesting thing, and we find similarly that the world can't exist in a state of pure kindness, says Rav Nachum, nor can it exist in a state of pure justice. And we don't find a kiyum, this is the word, we don't find a sustained existence in an even balance of the two, of kindness and justice. And this is from Chazal, right? Rather, what we needed was a balance of the two opposite midos, the opposite qualities, with a force to be machriya between them. Something that's going to come and decide. Hashem came and said the world's going to be just over on the tzad of kindness. In essence, really everything's kindness, but the way that the ofen of the world, like the way that we engage with things and Hashem engages with us, there's Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is like the chesed, the kindness. There's Elokim, which is justice and strictness and nature. And so this is sort of the balance that we find ourselves. Even the two names, Yud Kei Vav Kei, like a revealed kindness from Hashem, whereas Elokim, nature. There's this side of nature, of like, so to say, like atheism, and there's the side of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the side of like Hashem's revealed presence. So it's Judaism versus atheism, and a person decides like the way we act is going to reflect one or the other. And we'll speak later about the implications. The moral implications are tremendous. The societal implications, we'll speak later in Mitzvah Hashem. And this isn't the only place we see this parallel. So a person has to balance his personal character traits in the Torah way, right? The Rambam says, so a person has to have the balance of a person has to be not frugal. A person has to be not too frugal, but also not too generous, right? Like, you have to balance the different character traits, and then what's the point of balancing them? We're just trying to be a balanced person? No, it's that when they're balanced, so the time comes and a person has to act, and he's always going to be machriya between these traits in the correct way. Right, when you have the balance and a situation comes up, so now you know which side that situation falls on, and you can act in the correct way. And this is what we're here for, to make the right decisions in life. This is the essence of our life. And it's also the case with with making decisions. The Vilna Gaon explains how the Torah helps two hearts to become one, is the language he uses, translated. And similarly, every decision, as mentioned, has two sides, and the Torah helps a person to understand each of the two sides. We see like the kinds of discussions about even matters that to most people they wouldn't even think about it. So a person who studies Torah sees a tremendous amount of decisions in his everyday, because Torah makes a person conscious. It says Kulchem Chaim Hayom. The Torah it causes a person to think about life, and to think about his purpose and about morality, and to see that the sides of something, and to choose the right one. This is the emphasis on Talmudic study in Judaism. It's because we see in Nefesh HaChaim, this concept that there's the physical world. And then there's land and there's the water. In the water, it's like Kabbalah. Like everything is just one, and you're like swimming around the water, and there's no distinctions. But we live on land. Like most of what we do, I've asked both a Litvish and a Hasidic Rav, and they pretty much said exactly the same thing. For what percentage of my learning should be Talmudic study, and it was the majority, significant majority, both of them. Like this is Yiddishkeit, right? Like, for a man learns the Talmud because it teaches a person to look at these difficult things and to see the lines and the boundaries. Like when you're on land, everything has its defined boundaries. So this is really we're here to understand things and to distinguish, in order that when the time comes, we know how to add things up and to make the right decision. And not only that, but when we act and live in the correct way, so we justify creation, and we sustain the world. And for that, I'll Mitzvah Hashem post some sources in this lecture. And so there it is. We see this very interesting parallel between CP violation and all these different yesodos, all these different fundamental concepts of Judaism. And again, we say like these are things that are compelling. A person realizes the godless of Hashem, and it brings a person closer. It teaches us about the Torah. It helps us to understand it when we see these parallels. And it also, we could say, Hashem looked into the Torah and created the world. Histakel b'reisa v'ra'alma. And also, a person learns Musar from the science. And it could be, I was speaking with a friend the other day, and it could be like, even if the science someday is going to be, proven wrong in some way, it doesn't necessarily mean that the principles that we learned from them, the things we learned about the Torah, it doesn't mean that those were wrong, that our job in the world is based on what Hashem gives us, and every appearance of everything is from Hashem. And so given what Hashem gives us, we have to look into the world and see what's compelling and what's not, and how do we, use what we see to understand the Torah and avodas Hashem and to serve Hashem in a greater way. And so there it is. There's this parallel between CP violation of, there's these two sides, and there can be no existence. The world wouldn't exist without, if you had an equal balance, there wouldn't exist, because matter would destroy itself. But there's a force, a special, mystical thing, a mysterious thing that pushes things to the side of matter. It's machriya bein zeh bein zeh. And so too in all of these, the Jewish court and the world of kindness versus din, and the way a person acts and balancing your minos. So all of these different things, we find that there's the world exists in just about a balance, and if you had a perfect balance, so then there'd be no kiyum. Comes this force and is machriya bein zeh bein zeh, and that's what yields the kiyum. That's what yields the sustained existence. And it's very interesting because all of these concepts are present in all of these all of these examples that we've stated. I know it's something very deep. It's something to reflect on. I hope that the listener is impressed by this, affected by it. I just, when I was in Shira and the Rav mentioned like the kiyum and machriya bein zeh, it's very interesting that today we have such a physical parallel. We have CP violation. And so returning to agnosticism, so we see that the world is in this delicate balance between the way we're supposed to live as a Jew and the way that we're not. And a person's job is to be machriya bein zeh and to pick the right choice and to choose life. Something very interesting that we see from here is there seems to be this interesting balance in the world between those who believe in God, right, between a religious person and people who, bichlal are secular, right, or like maybe they identify as Christian, but we, in terms of like belief in God, we see this interesting thing where we see the world as like in this 50-50 state, it's a very interesting thing, because if you would tell me there was a natural world, maybe going back to this, naturalism. If you would tell me that there's a natural world, so I would expect that there's no such thing as consciousness, let alone a concept of spirituality, let alone that it should be that when a person would attribute something to Hashem, that there would be the concept of Hashem if there were a natural world. Maybe at most, like maybe you'd have people like worshiping the water cycle. Water starts like. It's in the water and then it evaporates and it comes back down from the clouds, it's sort of, the whole thing is just a pella, first that the world is like in this balance, and secondly, just the fact that there is such a, not only consciousness, not only spirituality, but the concept of God, the concept of Hashem. I think that's a pretty, both of these are a pretty amazing thing. I think it is a pretty amazing thing, so I'll just conclude regarding the words of Devarim and of the Rambam. So it says in Devarim, Re'ei nasati lefanecha hayom es hachayim ves hatoiv ves hamaves ves hara asher nochi mitzavcha hayom la'ahavas Hashem Elokecha laleches b'dracha v'lishmor mitzvaysa v'chukoysa v'mishpatav v'chayisa v'ravisa v'rachtes Hashem Elokecha v'aretz asher ta'ava shama l'rishta. He says, see, I set before you today life and goodness, death and evil. For I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments, decrees, and laws. Then you will live and increase, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. continues, Ha'idoisi lachem hayin. Es hashamayim es haaretz hachayim v'hamaves nasati lefanecha habracha v'haklala uvacharta v'chayim l'ma'an tichya ata v'zarecha. This day I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live. So it really echoes these concepts. Comes the Rambam, I'll say it in English, he says, permission is given to every individual to direct himself to follow a good path and become righteous, or to follow a bad path and become evil. This is what is written in the Torah, and now man is like one of us, knowing good and evil. And so we see from the Torah that while a naturalism sort of mitzias, the world of naturalism, we wouldn't expect to see these sorts of things, to see this balance between being able to serve Hashem and not, and that we should be at the balance. As we mentioned, we wouldn't expect that one would have consciousness. A person wouldn't expect a person to have spirituality. A person wouldn't expect the concept of God. A God that we can't see, right? That is beyond physicality. And furthermore, we wouldn't expect that there should be a free will. Right? We experience that we have a choice to choose this or to choose that. But the thing is, a machine, when a machine's operating, so it doesn't experience a free will. What is this free will that we experience? On the other hand, the Torah itself certainly does predict all of these phenomena. It predicts that there's going to be a balance between to live as a Jew and to not live as a Jew. It predicts that a person is going to have this situation of free will, where it really feels at every moment. And a person, the Rambam says, should feel at every moment the decision that he makes he's 50% in the middle, and this decision that he makes is what's going to be machriya, and what's going to determine who he is and how the world ends up. And this is the way that we live as a Jew, constantly caring about every action that we take, because even the small things, even the smallest action has tremendous importance. And with this mindset, I think a person can very much grow as a person, both for his small actions and his big actions, and who he is. And a person, Mir Hashem, everybody will make the right actions and the right choices in life, and to become great as Hashem wants of each and every one of us. And thank you so much for listening to this episode. Have a wonderful week.